Welcome to another episode of In My Own Words. I'm your host, Cory Thames, and with me in the studio today, I have my friend,
Yeah,
Cook County Commissioner and Global Head of Public Affairs and Policy, Bridget Gaynor.
thank
Commissioner,
you.
thanks for joining.
Well, Corey, thank you for having me. This is awesome.
So I like to start
Yeah,
each episode with a lightning round of questions.
let's do it.
So you just tell me the first answer that comes to your mind.
Okay.
What was your best concert?
Bruce Springsteen, Soldier Fields,
Okay.
sometime in the 80s. I'm not going to tell you when.
What's your favorite movie of all time?
Bronx Tale.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Not even close. Yeah. By a mile.
Who's a leader that you look up to?
So probably a combo platter. Like Dorothy Day is my kind of spiritual mentor. If I
Mhm.
think it's just, I mean, she's obviously not, she's not a political leader. I think, I appreciate someone like a Jimmy Carter or even Jim Florio, who was the governor of New Jersey, like people who made a really hard decision and lost,
Mhm.
but kept going at it because, politics, I think generally is about disappointing your base at a pace that they can absorb.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you don't bear the consequences, but yeah.
I love that. You don't really hear that. People who made a hard decision and lost.
Yeah. But you admire them because they kind of knew they were probably going to lose when they did it,
Mhm.
but they did it anyway.
Okay. What's the best piece of advice anybody ever gave you?
Well, there's a funny one, kind of. When I started my job at Aon, there was all this food set up on a banquet table and or like a conference table, and a bunch of people were gathering for the meeting,
Mhm.
and I was about to walk over there and start unwrapping the food to get something, and one of the older ladies is like, "Don't touch the food." I was like, "What?" She goes, "Don't touch the food," because inevitably you're going to be over there and someone's like, "Hey, honey, grab me a muffin." And you're going to totally throw off any kind of game that you think you're bringing to this meeting. But I think that's a metaphor for lots of other things.
Okay.
Make sure you're always putting yourself in the best possible position.
I love that.
Yeah,
And then last question is, what's a mantra that you live by?
that's easy. So I always think like, don't tolerate things for other people that you wouldn't tolerate for yourself.
That's also a really good one. So, as you know, I start every episode talking about upbringing. I
Okay.
think it is so important in shaping who you are and what you become. You grew up on the south side of Chicago
Yeah,
in the Beverly neighborhood.
I did.
And so,
St. Barnabas, for those of you who are listening to the neighborhood. Yeah.
and so how did the south side mold you into who you are? And what does it mean to you?
So, I think and I know I'm not going to get a lot of argument from you, but like I think the South Side is in many ways the most iconic place to grow up in
Mhm.
Chicago. People are connected in a way that you just don't find in other parts of the city. It's not like other parts of the city aren't awesome and have their people and have their neighborhoods and have their community, but there's something about the South Side that makes you feel like you're connected to anyone who could have been 4 or 5 years on others, above or below you,
Mhm.
could have been in a whole 'nother neighborhood on the South Side. Like if I meet someone from the South Side, it takes us like 2 seconds, two degrees of separation to figure out who we
It's
know.
not 6
In some
degrees, it's
ways,
like
it's
2.
not 6. And also it's like sometimes you'll see older people and they're like, it's almost like they have to race to figure out what they have in common. Like, okay, wait a minute. Where are you from? And then you inevitably know people in common.
Yeah.
But I think that stretches, and that's just not like, oh, you only know the people from your neighborhood or you only know the people from your ethnic background, or you like, I think when I started working at City Hall, what I found is I don't know, there was something about the way that people on the South Side could connect with each other, Black, white, Latino, across the board.
Yeah.
So, I always think whenever my kids come home and they're like, "Oh, I met so and so. Oh, yeah, where are they from?" I didn't ask them that. How could you not ask them that? That's like the most important question you could ask anyone. Tells you everything you want to know. Do I want to bother going forward? You know that. Or they'll say, "Oh, I met somebody and their mom's from the South Side." Where? I don't know. Well, like, where'd she go to grammar school? I don't know. Why would I ask someone that? So I was like, I don't just want to know where they're from. I want to know where they went to grammar school because I don't
That
know.
that is an age-old Chicago question.
Totally. I want to know the answer to that. Once you tell me that, then I'm going to determine how much time I'm going to put into this relationship.
Yes, I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah,
So you went to University of Illinois
I did.
and got your bachelor's in English and political science.
Yep.
Then you went on to University of Chicago and got your MBA.
Yeah. Years later.
Years,
Yeah, there's
okay.
a big space. Yeah.
And what I think so most people would probably know you from Cook County Commissioner
Yep.
and then also your work with Aon,
Yeah.
but a lot of folks, including myself,
Uh-huh.
would probably be just surprised to know that you actually started as a community organizer,
I
first
did.
in New York with
Uh-huh.
the Jesuit
Yep.
Volunteer Corps, and
Yep.
then back here in Chicago, organizing around education issues.
Yep.
And so talk to us a little bit about how you got your start, and then what drew you to community organizing.
So I was at U of I, which is great. Went there like lots of people. It was really good education. And but I knew once I graduated I wanted to do something service oriented, Peace Corps or and at the time, the Jesuits had like a lot of other religious orders of Catholics at least, had a program where you could, go for a year. And I lived in a lay volunteer community. I lived in a rectory in a neighborhood called Crown Heights, and it's in Brooklyn. And the neighborhood's fascinating. It's half Orthodox Jews, and the other half is West Indian, like Jamaican, Haitian, Trinidadian. And so we lived in the rectory of the parish there, and it was a trip. So I lived with other people. I was trained as an organizer, and I worked for a guy named Jeff Canada who started the Harlem Children's
Mm,
Zone. He was my first boss, and then also worked under an organization that was run by an order of nuns, Sisters of the Good Shepherd. And they both were incredible organizers, and it really taught me. The interesting thing is what I learned from Jeff Canada, but also what I learned from the sisters was years later when I went to business school at University of Chicago. It was similar lessons, just a different focus,
mhm.
which is the most important thing you can do is understand what someone's incentive structure is. What is it that they want?
Yes.
Because once you understand what they want, then you can figure out if it's at all applicable to what you want or how to join in common cause and go forward. But you also understand how to bring them over to your side. It's the reason, like you, I always ask the question where someone's from.
Mhm.
It's, even if they're not from Chicago and I'm not going to know them, but it just oh, you grew up in a small town, or you grew up in this place, or,
Yeah.
it tells you a lot about how someone's mind might work and the things they might find important. So the organization was an Alinsky style organizing. So Saul Alinsky started in Chicago,
Mhm.
but a lot of Catholic organizations ended up using that model. And it's something that has literally led my work to today, including the land bank, which is, you got to get people organized in their own progress moving forward. You cannot come in from the outside and be like, I'm so smart that I have a good heart. I want to get to the answer. So I'm just going to tell you what the answer is.
Mhm.
You should just follow me. It doesn't work like that. You got to you got to have 100 conversations,
Yeah.
because at the end of that conversations, all those conversations, you're like, oh, okay, now I know. This is the actual answer. This is the thing we need to do. But you've also, now they're on your side, and now they're working together for something. And they also have to have skin in the game.
Yeah.
You cannot just come from the outside with ideas or the outside with money and think that you're going to be able to make change in a community, because it just doesn't work that way. It's not
You
sustainable.
you have to be able to resonate with those neighborhoods, and they have to really believe in and get behind what you're talking about. So let's fast forward a little bit.
Hmm.
After organizing, you got the government bug, and
Yeah, I
you
went to
went
work for Rich Daly.
you
Yeah.
did. So you started as a budget analyst.
Yeah. So after I left New York, I ran a community center at Senn High School,
Mhm.
and which is interesting. Arnie Duncan actually ran the community center, both funded by MacArthur, at Kenwood Park,
Mm.
Kennecott Park. And so we started at the same time, and he was in a school, I was in a school, he was in a park. Did that for a couple years, met Rich Daly that way. Ended up going to the budget office, because somebody told me once, who was at City Hall, there's only two places that actually make decisions: the budget office and IGA. So pick one of those and go there. And so I went to the budget office.
I went to IGA.
There you go. We got good advice.
And then you transitioned to the Chicago Park District, and you
Yep.
were director of lakefront parks.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'd like to say it was a lot of thought went into it, but I got called down to the mayor's office like 2 days before I was getting married, and he was like, "Hey, you're going to go to run the lakefront parks." I was like, "Oh, okay." He's like, "There's someone in that job now. Go over there and have an interview. It's all going to work out." Super awkward in the beginning, but I was like, "All
I
right,
could imagine.
sounds like a plan." I was like, I'm going to leave to get married. Don't make me come back and then you've changed your mind about the Park District job, but I've already cleaned out my desk. So the Park District job was amazing. I love the Park District. It's the only thing in the city that everybody, rich, poor,
Yeah.
uses. So I have a lot of affection. Love the Park District.
Did you always know that you wanted to go into government eventually, or was it?
I kind of always thought I did. I always loved politics, even when I was a kid. I
Mhm.
remember, I did a lot of reading when I was a kid, and I remember reading Boss. I think I was in 5th grade at the Walker Branch Library on 111th Street, and I thought government was fascinating. Plus,
Mhm.
it was the thing that could actually make it, they got to make decisions, they got to make things happen. It was interesting.
Okay.
I liked it.
Very cool.
Mhm.
So in 2009,
Yep.
which was a big year for you,
Yeah, it was.
you were appointed to fill the Cook County Commissioner seat that was left vacant by now Congressman Mike Quigley.
Right. It was the
Um,
Barack Obama domino.
yeah.
He got elected president, took Rahm to his chief of staff. Quigley went into that job, and then I knew I was going to run.
Mhm.
Quigley wanted his chief of staff at the time, who's actually now running for alderman in the 46th ward,
Mm.
but the committeeman had the votes, and I got the votes and it was 9 months of an appointment, and then there was an election.
So talk to us a little bit about the process of deciding whether you want to run, because it's such a huge
Mhm.
decision to make, right? And you're thinking, is it the right time? Can I raise the money? Will I have the support? So what was your thought process to determine whether or not you were going to run? Because you said it very surely, like, I knew I was going to run.
You know what? I probably was very naive at the time of what was involved.
Mhm.
I had thought about running against Mike 4 years before, but then found out we were expecting my son, and so decided not to do it. And then when I thought, oh, there's an opening, if I don't go for it now, it's not going to happen. And you'll appreciate this. I mean, having been at City Hall
Mhm.
and Mayor Daley was still the mayor, and knowing how the dynamic works between the council and the mayor, I thought, I don't know if I can really be independent over at City Hall, like, because there was less room to navigate. I thought the county would be interesting. Plus, when I came back here and I was working at Senn High School, I was down at the juvenile detention center all the time. I'd always worked in that issue of young people and youth development, and all those issues were compelling to me as a person,
Mhm.
the things the county deals with. So I was like, oh, I can do that. And the district is interesting. It's the lakefront, which is very left leaning, and then it was the northwest side, which was a lot like the southwest side where I grew up.
Mhm.
So it felt really comfortable, and it was a good combo. And I decided I'll go for the appointment. I don't think I'll get it, but at least it'll put me in the position to run. But I got the appointment, so it ended up working out great.
Very cool.
Yeah,
I love the fact that you knew for certain that you were gonna run,
yeah,
because you, especially now, you have so many young people that are interested in pursuing elected office, and some are successful, some are not. But you decided to step in, go all in, and so
yeah.
I love that you decided to take the plunge.
Well, and I also felt like, look, growing up in the 19th ward, and you're from a similar type of organization place, like, I knew I could do the field work.
Mhm.
I could get the signatures. I could go door to door. I would have people who would help me on the volunteer basis. So, like, I was really comfortable with that part of the campaign.
Yeah.
Raising money and all that other stuff, I didn't have a clue, but I knew at least I could execute that part. So it wasn't too scary because I'd done campaigns always.
Hi, I'm Tawana Streeter, host of DIY DEI. Tune in on Monday at 7 p.m. as I talk about imposter syndrome.
I was not being my authentic self. I felt like I had to fit in. I had to look a certain way
Yeah.
in order to
Mhm.
fit in.
You have such a unique perspective, and I know we've talked about it
Hmm.
before, because you have the government perspective as somebody that has worked in government, now as an elected official.
Yep.
But you also have a private sector background as well. You know,
Yeah.
you've ascended in Aon and become I love this title, global head of public affairs
Right.
and policy.
Right. Whatever that means. But yeah.
And so, and I think that that gives you such a unique
Hmm.
perspective, particularly when you're trying to tackle some of these major issues. So, one, talk a little bit about your career and how you transitioned into Aon and
Hmm.
became the global head of public affairs and policy.
Well, look, it has a really good Chicago beginning to it. So a woman that I worked for at City Hall
Mhm.
went over to Aon, and I at the time was at the Park District, and she called me up and she said, "We need somebody here to run like operations around mergers and acquisitions." I was like, "I don't know anything about that," but I was in business school at night. I was going to school at night while I was working at the Park District, and I said, "What is it?" She said, "Well, you have this target company and you got to know everything about them. And then you have to figure out what is good about them, bad about them. You got to figure out who's going to buy it,
Mhm.
research the market, pitch it to them. And then by like some date, you got to execute and sell it." And I said, "Well, that's like kind of like a campaign.
Yeah.
It's like a candidate. So I said, okay, I'd probably do that. And I'd never been in the private sector. I had no idea really if I would ever do that. But I was getting ready to have kids actually at the time. And the city, I mean, I don't even know if they have maternity leave yet, but they sure didn't have it 22 years ago.
Mhm.
And so, and I loved my job. You were on call all the time, especially in the summertime. I was on call constantly.
Yeah.
This was when I had a pager, so I'm going to date myself. But like I would get a page from the mayor's secretary. He rode his bike down Lakeshore Drive and the garbage cans are too full. I was like, it's August, Monday morning. What do you want? Okay. Like I'm out there
What do you want me
running
to do?
around. Doesn't matter. You know what I want you to do? I want you to go there, get rid of that garbage. Yeah. There's a fish floating in the harbor by North Avenue. Okay, I'm on it. So I just thought, I'll try this out. I'll make a change. And I did that on the finance side, which is really probably not my strong suit, but did that for a couple of years. And then the opening came up in a kind of a government affairs position. Now, Ann doesn't really have any business in the city, so it's not like that. It's more globally oriented. And I've done a lot of different things. I started a public sector business. I worked on a big M&A transaction, but I also now co-lead our climate strategy. So I'm with someone who's based in London, deciding how we at the firm are going to move forward and actually really try to address decarbonizing what our clients do, reducing the carbon footprint, and leaning into the climate investments at Aon. So it's been fascinating, and it's a fabulous company. They, 5 years ago there, we started an apprentice program, and with full support of the CEO, is Greg Case, like really committed because, our workforce was very non-diverse and we were only hiring from the same places like everybody else.
Yeah.
All the jobs required 4 years of college. But we looked at all of our entry-level positions and thought, which ones really require college versus where had we just gotten in the habit of hiring for college? Found a bunch that didn't probably really require college. We just always hired from this because it's a kind of shooting fish in a barrel. You go down to college and it's like accounting, marketing, IT, they're all in one place.
Yeah.
So we did a partnership with City Colleges of Chicago. So, I could see Harold Washington College from my window at Aon, but we'd never hired anyone from there. So now we're 6 years into a partnership with them, and we have hundreds of apprentices. But more importantly, it's a 2-year program. We hire them out of City College, but we've recruited 160 other companies around the country. And now there's thousands of apprentices around. There's in 8 different cities in the U.S. And Juan Salgado and City Colleges have been an amazing partner. But now we have a hugely diverse majority-minority class of incoming apprentices every year. And it's been a new doorway that's opened up into corporate life.
I love that.
And that's what I love. It's one of the things I love about working at Aon, that they're really, really committed to the things that are real, less about, making big statements and making big speeches, but
All
more
the
about,
fluff.
yeah, that's not their way. They're really doing the work. So I love it.
How has working in the private sector influenced how you lead on the government side?
It absolutely has, because, it's really easy when you're in politics. You're in camp, like it's us and it's them. And it's easy to vilify the people that are on the other side of you. But really what you figure out is they're not opposed to you. They just want different things. And so what I really have to constantly figure out is, this is what I want to accomplish, but how are you going to make sure that everybody else can live with it?
Yeah.
Because, every once in a while you can really shove something down, but we're watching what's happening in Paris right now. When you try to proceed with something without a vote, it's not really that sustainable. I'll be curious to see how that works out.
Yeah, me
But
too.
it's hard, but it's made me more pragmatic on both sides. Because, politics is a lot about intuiting and listening to what people really want.
Yeah.
Because so much about politics isn't just about executing on things to do with business. It's people's lives, their safety, their health, their ability to afford a home. Those things are emotional as well as financial. And so you have to be able to really be pretty bilingual when it comes to being effective in politics. And that's true in any large organization, business included. It's run by humans.
Yeah.
So you got to figure out how to get things done.
Okay. You mentioned this earlier in a couple of times during the interview about the Cook County Land Bank, and January marked its 10-year anniversary. And
Yep.
you were one of the big advocates behind the
was.
creation
Yeah.
of the Cook County Land Bank.
I was.
And so talk to us about, why was it so important to create the land bank at that time And what do you think are some of the big successes that the land bank has had?
So the land bank, otherwise known as my fourth child, because I do love this thing so much. So, but it's a lot from my time earlier at the city
Mhm.
and being a neighborhood person. So after the financial crisis in '08 or '09, people started calling my office like they're going through foreclosure. They can't, they're getting eviction notices. They don't know what to do. And that's because these banks issued all these mortgages. And then people stopped paying because the economy tanked, but also the mortgages were unsustainable in many ways, balloon
Yeah.
payments, all this other stuff. So then the bank started the process, but in Chicago, one of the most damaging manifestations of the foreclosure crisis was we had 10 judges in foreclosure court in the beginning, and that number didn't really change that much. And so it used to take like 80 days to get a foreclosure. It eventually took 600 days to process a foreclosure. So I had relationships with a lot of the Southside Alderman, Michelle Harris, who
Mhm.
is, a woman that I probably respect her more in city government than any person who has been around in the last generation. Tony Beal, others. So Michelle and I would drive around the neighborhood because Chatham is not that, it's just west of Beverly.
Yeah.
And you'd see neighborhoods like Marynook and other places that had vacancies, and you think that's bananas. Like,
Mhm.
this is a highly desirable neighborhood. What is going on? And the easy answer was like, oh, the banks aren't lending, or they this. No, that's not the answer. The answer is the court system was insane
Yeah.
and it took way too long. A house would be vacant on your block. You couldn't even figure out who owned it. Um, and so what we realized was the court system was too complicated for an average person to ever get a hold of that house. But once it went into foreclosure, became tax delinquent, it got into this other terrible rabbit hole of what's called the tax delinquency system in this county. I mean, if I were to trace the history of Chicago and Cook County through things like redlining and contract buying, we know about those. They were meant to keep Black people from being in certain neighborhoods, certainly from buying houses or
Mhm.
accumulating wealth. But the property tax system in this city and in this county, and the delinquency and the scavenger sale and the tax buyers, the fact that we let private tax buyers come in and benefit from this, that is no better than redlining. It is absolutely the child of redlining, because once they made redlining illegal, then it went to contract buying, which is I'll sell you the house, but you never really own it.
Yeah.
You kind of lease it from me. And then once they made that illegal, then all of a sudden this thing reared its head, and houses would get all this back taxes. The house wasn't worth enough to buy it with the back taxes. And you got this very narrow set of people who figured out how to game the system. They had extremely powerful allies in Springfield, and the law just got more and more and more to their favor.
Mhm.
Before the land bank came in, you just, no average person could come and buy a vacant house. Even vacant house had been sitting there for 5 or 6 years, 10 years,
Yeah.
and rehab it. So the land bank is in many ways just a hack for a broken system. And it's really, and it gets to this whole thing of not tolerating things for other people you wouldn't tolerate for yourself.
Mhm.
They wouldn't tolerate a 10-year vacant rat infested house or a 10-year vacant house on the north side or in a white neighborhood for a month
Mhm.
or 6 months. They certainly wouldn't tolerate it for a decade. And the idea was that the only thing standing between it was this nonsense of a constant running up of the meter on back taxes is unconscionable. And so we just came in. So we came in and we cleared the title and tax ourselves. Took us 2 or 3 years sometimes. We hired a fleet of lawyers to figure out how to do it.
Mhm.
Sometimes we made mistakes. We sell to people with a criminal record because we do, and we don't ask questions. Sometimes, it was a lumpy process, but this system has existed for 40 years. And we were the first ones to go in and really try and pull properties out of there. So, I mean, less than 10% of properties ever made it out of the scavenger sale. So we're taking thousands
Wow.
out now. So we're almost 2,000 houses that have been rehabbed, and they've been rehabbed by small developers, most of whom are Black or Latino, and they live in the neighborhood. We have this metric we call community wealth, which is we look at when we get this vacant land and we clear the tax and title and we sell it to a developer, $3,000, $5,000, $7,000 for this home or this lot, sometimes 15, 20. We record that number, and then we record the number when the developer sells it to a homeowner,
Mhm.
because over 85% of what we do is for home ownership, and that's the point. We have created $171 million. That is the difference between what we sold the property to the developer for and now what it's sold to a homeowner for. And that's home ownership wealth that sits in the community. I'll give you an example. We recruited 5 developers that we had worked with independently. We brought them together, and they bought 6 lots on 63rd and Evans.
Mhm.
And so you might have seen this in the news last week. Benita Harris is the leader. They're amazing. I love them all. But we sold for $6,000 these lots because they had been vacant for probably 12 years, I think was the average.
Yeah.
They built 30 units of housing. And now that property that we sold for $6,000 is worth $8.8 million.
Wow.
Because each of those 30 homes is selling for about anywhere between $280,000 to $350,000, $380,000.
Mhm.
And that's all for home ownership. And the idea that no one ever bothered to just come in and proactively clear the title and the taxes, and so is not acceptable. So the land bank, as I said before, it's a hack for a broken system. It will stick around as long as the city makes it so hard to develop. I mean, it's almost impossible for a small developer to get through the gauntlet of the 7,000 things you need to do
Yes.
at the city, because they, look, and I have taken lots of bats in the face in the paper, and there's a lot of things to criticize, but at the end of the day, who cares?
Yeah.
Because we've developed a couple thousand units of housing, and there's thousands more in the pipeline. We've also built hundreds of businesses with these small developers, and there is zero reason that shouldn't have been done 30 or 40 years ago.
Mhm.
But every time you get a bad story, you have a desire to protect yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask for an affidavit. Now I'm going to ask for another check. Now I'm going to prohibit this group of people from getting involved. Or now I'm going to skip that kind of neighborhood because that's too risky. And then you end up being in bubble wrap and no one gets anything done.
Mhm.
So here we are. It's 10 years in, and we'll see if the new mayor feels differently about it. But we're just keeping on. And in my mind, like, I don't want to live next to a vacant house.
Yeah.
And neither does anybody else. So
I could see why you say it's your fourth child.
yeah, I do love it.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
You've blazed this really impressive career for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people look up to you and aspire to be like you. As you think about your life and career,
Mm-hmm.
what do you want your legacy to be?
Oh God, that's a good, my dad died 4 years ago. So it was just 4 years in March, and he was a phenomenal man. I don't know if you ever knew him, but he was so dedicated to our neighborhood. He was so involved in things, and everywhere I would go, I would run into people who knew him and loved him. And he made and they would say, God, he is a really good man.
Mhm.
And so if I think about what I want my legacy to be, I want it to be that, obviously the people's lives are better. But I would be happy if, like happened to us at my dad's wake, people that I barely knew showed up and told a story about how he helped them, what he did, something quiet behind the scenes, but it really made a difference for them.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I want my legacy to be.
Okay. And that is the perfect segue into my last question of the
Okay.
interview, which is, who is Bridget Gaynor in your own words?
I love my city,
Mhm.
and
I can tell.
yeah, and I love my children, and hopefully they've returned the favor. But I'm someone who works hard and wants to push things to be better, but interested in people and things, interesting, hopefully, to the outside world. But when I'm at the end of the day, you want people to just be able to say, yeah, she's a really good person. I'm glad I knew her.
I love it.
Yeah.
Commissioner, thanks for joining today, and thank you for continuing to be a leader in this
Thanks.
city that actually is leading with integrity, and is really focused on creating better outcomes for all communities.
I love it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
That's great.